please come up and I will start introducing folks. So immediately to my right is Dick Grace. Dick Grace, the man of many hats, is faculty emeritus for materials engineering and the founding head of the Division of Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies in 1969, and he remained head until 1982. He also served as the head of the Department of Freshman Engineering from 1981 to 1987. To his right is Phil Wankat, the Clifton L. Lovell Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Chemical Engineering and Professor Emeritus of Engineering Education. He served as the head of the Department of Freshman Engineering from 1987 to 1995 and the head of the Division of Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies from 2000 to 2004. To his right is David Radcliffe, the Kamiar-Higigi Head and Epistemology Professor Emeritus of Engineering Education. And to his right is Mary Pilot, the Director of Engineering Education Undergraduate Degree Programs and Associate Professor of Engineering Practice. Mary is also a PhD alumna from our PhD program in engineering education. So I'm just going to jump right in and ask Professor Grace, can you discuss freshman engineering in the early days under Dr. Spalding and in your own days of leading the unit? Specifically, if you could talk about the need for changes in the curriculum and changes in student advising.
Glad to participate, but you'll have to bear with me. I'm 89 and I need a few notes to keep me on track. So the overriding theme that goes from the 1950s through today is competition for students between the schools. So freshman engineering, in whatever form it is a holding tank for all of those students who are going on to electrical, mechanical, civil, all the other schools. And there is a terrific competition among the school heads for what's the take? What am I going to get? How many students will move from freshman engineering into the schools? From a curricular point of view, we finally, in 1955-56, we finally got rid of, bear with me, foundry, welding, heat treating, and mechanical drawing. It took acts of God to get those out of the curriculum, but George Hawkins was up to the design, up to that. And for engineering design, the Grinter Report, which was the sea change in engineering education, that provided plenty of opportunity for engineering design to come into the freshman year. If I jump forward, there are three huge changes that occurred: the Women in Engineering program, the Minority Engineering program, and computers. Those three programs changed the landscape completely over the next 30, 40 years.
Nice, thank you. So Professor Wankat, historically, and still significant today, the design and evolution of first-year courses has continued to increase interest and retention. Were there specific challenges around interest and retention that you can recall from when you were head of freshman engineering in the late 80s and early 90s?
Well, let me say I have followed Dick as head of freshman engineering and then later of IDA. I was smart enough to not follow him and become a vice president of the university. Yes, that retention always has been and probably will be a problem, that there is an inherent balance between quality and enforcing quality and having high retention. One thing that will happen is as you bring in better students, your retention will go up. But you will still have some students that for whatever reason don't live up to their potential. And so the only places, I like to say, the only places that have 100% retention are Sing Sing and Michigan City, okay? Michigan City is an Indiana jail, okay? And if they don't have 100% retention, then there's a big problem. So 100% retention is not a goal, but you want it to be higher. And so we worked at that, and one of the first things I noticed was that I changed the mindset of the advisors, and there were a lot of professors advising at that time, and said, you will stop being so negative to people that want to transfer out of engineering, okay? You can be mildly negative, but then encourage them to find a home. And what happened was we almost immediately got a 2 percentage points increase in Purdue retention. And there are 3 retentions that are important. There's retention in the first year, finishing the first year and getting into one of the professional schools. There is retention to a Purdue engineering degree, and there is retention to any Purdue degree. And of course, if you talk to the provost, it's the last one. If you talk to the dean, it's the second one. And if you talk to the head of freshman engineering or E&E, it's the first one that's important. So you need to work at all 3 levels. And so we worked at this, and at the same time, you need to do 2 things. One is you have students that are very capable of doing it, and some of them get bored. So you have to give them challenges in the first year, which you can do through the design, so that they don't get bored and think something other than engineering is going to be more fascinating. And second, you have students who struggle for either in a course, or they struggle because of getting used to being away from home and sociologically in college. And they need a little bit of help. It's not at all unusual for a student to have help the first year and then to find the following 3 years, even though the professional schools will tell you that their years are more difficult. Well, you know, if you look at purely technical content, they are, but if you look at all the changes the freshman is going through, they are not. So.
All right, thank you. So Professor Grace, we talked earlier on about how you helped increase engineering enrollment in the late 60s through the creation of the Interdisciplinary Engineering Studies degree program. Can you tell us a little bit about the hurdles that you had to overcome to make IDE work? Yes, yeah, so that's for you.
Sorry.
How did you make IDE work
Sorry.
in the late
Here's how I
60s and early 70s?
At least a third of the faculty got behind the IDE program. So there were 100+ faculty members that were interested enough in students and interested in making the program work. 2/3 of the faculty were pretty much silent, just not interested, other than they would have liked the students to be enrolled in their own schools. The school heads viewed IDE in the early days as unfair competition. I thought the program was too easy for the students, and they never stopped harassing me or the students by telling them, you'll never get a job as an IDE student. Interesting. Turf ruled. Civil engineering thought they owned environmental engineering. There was no room for anybody else on the campus. Mechanical engineering said, we own acoustical engineering. Biomedical was broader. Double E, Chem E, mechanical engineering all had faculty members that were doing environmental work. And so the perception was that all of these things taken together, department budgets, harassment, competition, I view it as follows. Henry Kissinger said it best. The reason campus politics are so vicious is that the stakes are so small. Thank you.
Thank you. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Professor Wonkat, so both MDE and IDES cross many boundaries, physically and metaphorically, across campus. And one specific boundary that you worked hard to cross was the intersection between engineering and the College of Liberal Arts, and particularly combining engineering and the fine arts. What did it take for you to develop long-standing relationships with CLA, specifically the theater department, that helped broaden the range of concentrations that we have today?
I did the most important thing that any child can do. I chose great parents. Dick Grace and Dave Kessler were the two people ahead of me as the directors of interdisciplinary engineering. They set up the program with theater, and all I did was make sure I didn't mess up. And I worked to continue, and I tried very hard to make sure that the theater department realized that engineering appreciated their efforts and that I appreciated their efforts and did what I could. And can you stand up, Rick?
Yes.
Okay, Rick Thomas. If you're an acoustical engineer, you know Rick Thomas. Is Rich here? No, okay. Oh, okay. And so really what I did was carry on what had been done before me.
Excellent. So I'm going to skip to Professor Pilat. So those of you, we're working from a draft, but if people will indulge me for a moment. Skipping to the present day of MDE, I know that you've adopted the purple squirrel as your mascot to help work through some of the challenges and explanations to help develop an identity for MDE students and IDS students that they can then take and explain to those external to the unit and external to Purdue as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you developed that concept and how students have responded?
I'm looking over at David to see if he remembers the day. We were having one of those deep conversations about what is it that held all of our different concentrations together, and how did we create a community where acoustical engineers could peaceably coexist with visual design engineers, and nano engineers could find love with theater engineers, right? And while academically we've developed a design spine that's been central to that, making sure that they have multiple design experiences throughout their academic career, we needed to create a more visual rallying point. How many of you have ever heard of the purple unicorn or a purple squirrel in relation to hiring or finding the elusive person, right? That has these unique experiences, multidisciplinary perspectives, different types of life values and ways of looking at problems. And so companies are always talking about finding these purple squirrels, these unique people. And so maybe a company doesn't need lots of them, but they at least need one in every company. And I thought, well, if every company needs one, we've got 120, right? So we can surely find 120 companies. And so the purple squirrel was kind of introduced to students as a way for them to start thinking about themselves as a unifying theme, right? We're not different as nano engineers and acoustical engineers and engineering management students. We really are these people that just look at engineering differently than the other disciplines. And so the rest is kind of history. David and I laughed about it, and then I took it and ran with it. And so the joke became reality, and it's really been quite nice. And it's been very effective in helping our community come together. Hence the purple squirrel.
All right, so this question is for Professor Radcliffe, and changing gears a little bit. One of the great things that I discovered coming in as a new head for the School of Engineering Education was that I had inherited this lovely strategic compass document that really laid out not just a strategic plan for the next 5 years, but really a guiding set of values and principles for who we are as a unit that seeks to use engineering education research to drive really innovations that move engineering forward and serve students better and better. And one of the 4 principles is ask the big questions. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what those big questions are that engineering education researchers tackle and why answering them is so important.
Yeah, thank you. The strategic plan, just to lead into this, Some of those images you saw earlier were the groups developing it, and one of the reasons why it works is that we used a process called appreciative inquiry, which was to engage the community over a long period. So it wasn't okay, we've got to whip out our strategic plan and next year it'll be something else. So this was a lot of deep thinking. And the questions really that we had then go back probably 70 years. So the big question is still, how do we best prepare future engineers for the complex socio-technical challenges that they're going to face globally? So it's not a lot different than 1952, except the specifics of that are different. And how are we going to have or develop faculty who are going to be best able to do that? Yes, they've got a PhD and they have some technical areas, but in developing these engineers for the future, it's going to be different. And if we're going to develop them, then we need to know surely something about the practice of engineering, current and emergent. We're not creating people to do what they've done forever, but how are we going to prepare people for whatever is coming along in the way we do engineering? And I mean, another overarching one, which certainly Kamya would have, well, he did talk about a lot, I guess, was how do we get the demographics of the engineering profession, and indeed the engineering professoriate, to perhaps better mirror the society that we serve. And this can be local and global. And that's an ongoing challenge. And while we've had programs now for 50 years in minority engineering and women in engineering, there's still a lot of work to do. So those overarching ones are still there. And then what flows from that are things like, do we really know our students and the communities they come from? And that's changing and evolving. Do we, I'm just losing my thread here. Do we really know what it is? What are the engineering ways of thinking and doing and being? It's not just about this pile of knowledge that you fill into a head, but it's about an act of being a professional. And there are then questions around how do individuals at all life stages encounter engineering and have authentic experiences of it. So whether it's a toddler and their families, whether it's a student entering college, whether it's a professional who's developing deeper expertise, what's that all about? And there are a lot of the main questions, and hidden behind there, Dick's comment referring to Kissinger, why is it so hard to have transformation in engineering education? Again, this is a 70-year story we're talking about, and there have been lots of changes, as we've heard, but it's still painfully slow. And so understanding some of those things, these are the deeper. Yes, there's 1,000 little very specific things we can go into, but these, I hope, are some of the higher level questions.
Thanks. And speaking of change, Professor Wonkat, you, I understand, had something to do with the formation of the School of Engineering Education, combining an undergraduate program with a PhD program, graduate programs in engineering education, that enabled us to ultimately become a school. And I'm wondering if you could expand on the history of how the Division of IDE came to merge with the Department of Freshman Engineering.
The Dean of Engineering, Linda Katay, gave a charge to a committee to basically morph freshman engineering into ENE. And the charge was that there would be the first-year program and there would be a graduate program. That was it. No undergraduate program. I, at that time, was head of IDE, and also being a lot younger than I am now and having a lot more energy and less sense, I was also the interim associate dean for the of engineering for undergraduates. So I was automatically on this committee. Now, why I was on the committee when there was no undergraduate program was because of the first-year program. And I sat in on a couple of meetings, I didn't say much, and it became real clear that this was going to be an incomplete division or department, but it would not be equivalent to all the other schools. At the same time, I every year was receiving letters from graduates who were requesting whatever help I could give to help them have the ability to take the professional engineer's exam or the fundamentals of engineering exam. And since we were not ABET accredited, and ABET, which used to be the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, and now is just ABET, okay, is a quasi-governmental organization in that as far as I know, every board of professional engineering in every state goes to the ABET website to check to see if you were graduated from an ABET accredited school. They look at the date you graduated and whether or not the program was accredited. So it has a quasi-governmental aspect to it, and our graduates were at a disadvantage. They could become licensed in Indiana, but it became immensely difficult in other states. There's not agreement between states to accept registration. And I had 0 faculty. At that time, there was no way with 0 faculty that you could become accredited. There were also some political problems within Purdue to becoming accredited. And I realized that if IDE joined with freshman engineering, we'd have a faculty, and we could work to become accredited, and it'd be great for the students. At the same time, I would lose the independence that IDE had. Okay? I would have to serve under whoever the department head was. And I knew the first department was going to be Kamiar, and that was fine. I had no idea who would follow Kamiar. Okay? David wasn't even at Purdue at that time, okay? So, no idea. And I thought about it for 2 weeks, and I decided, well, the students were more important than my independence of having somebody over me. And so I went to Dean Kate at my regular meeting with her and proposed and gave her the reasons that she changed the charge to include, if desired, an undergraduate program. And just let the committee take care of the rest of it. And they did. And so we merged. And that was it.
Fantastic. Which makes me think of another quote. Andy Warhol once said, "They say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself." So with that, we have just a few more minutes for a fire round of 1-minute questions. And I'm just going to go immediately to my right here and start with Professor Grace. What are you most proud of about your time at Purdue, and why?
Easy question. Finally, an easy one, folks. 2 words: helping others. Helping young students, faculty members, alumni, and their families. And I want to add a postscript to that. I have developed a personal game plan for the undergraduates that are present in the room today, and if you'll pass it along to your friends as well. 1, set some goals, organize your plans. Be a change agent, follow your dreams, and finally, don't let your classes interfere with your college education.
All right, Professor Wonkat.
I am most proud that I set my standards of what I was going to do as an engineering professor, that students were going to be first, and I stayed with it.
All right.
I guess I'm most proud, as Phil pointed out, as someone who wasn't here when I did come and I understood the program, but then I came to realize the rich history of new ideas in innovation engineering education going way back to the 50s, and just to be part of that continuum gives me, well, I'm very humbled and pleased to have been part of that for a short period of time.
And Professor Pilat, you're not done yet being at Purdue, but you can answer what you're most
still
proud
very
of
proud.
so far.
I think on behalf of me and Ms. Peckney, who's our current advisor Undoubtedly, we're most proud of our students. Our students come to us a lot of different pathways, some knowing who we are to begin with, some finding us along the way. But they make us so proud in the end. And Ms. Peckney always says, don't cry at graduation. Stop crying at graduation. But, you know, you see them go so far, and so we are very proud of our students.
All right, will you please help me thank our panelists? We have a couple minutes. If anybody has a question, I will come to you with the microphone.
Or Dawn, I can.
Oh, or Teresa will come to you with the microphone.
Does anybody have any questions? Think of one.
If you were going to design your own concentration today, knowing what you do, what would the title of your self-designed concentration be?
I have an easy one. I'd call it engineering. And I'd get rid of all of the other stuff, and then I'd worry about what I was going to do with it once I got into the planning mode.
I designed about 5 of them, so I don't want to do a 6th.
I might squib out and just say engineering as well. It's too hard to pick one. The whole point is whatever it is that's your particular passion or interest, there's got to be some engineering associated with it. So weave those two together.
I'll defer. I'm with Professor Wankat.
Another question? David?
I don't have a question, but I want to give you a profound thank you. You pulled this student out of the fire and gave him a chance to be an engineer, and I know I speak for probably most of the graduates of IDE and MDE on that point. So thank you so much, each and every one of you, for giving us that opportunity.
Maybe one more? Any takers? Okay.
So if you had a magic wand, you could change one item, what would it be? Here in the School of Education, Engineering Education, what would it be?
I'll pass.
And I think Mary agrees that theater engineering gives people outside of Purdue the wrong picture of what the graduates can do. And theater engineering should be broadened into calling it like entertainment or some other broad name, because the graduates can go into lots of fields and be very useful.
I don't have a particular thing to change, but as someone who came into the place, and when I really, as the head, then really began to understand IDE, MDE, I think it's the greatest idea that Purdue ever had, but it's kind of been kept under a bushel a little bit. So if there was some way in which we could get the word out, not in a boastful way, but just to have people come and discover what this thing is and what its potential might be. And it doesn't do away with the other areas of engineering. It's a complement. It's a chance for students to come to Purdue who, yeah, you can do all of these things, but you can do this other whole range of stuff under this. So to somehow get the word out, or not in a publicity way, but in a way that people start to hear about it and come and ask about it, because then they'll discover what it is and they'll be really impressed and probably want to be part of it.
And Dick would become famous.
All right, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Hey,
Thank you.
how about a
Sorry.
thank you to all of you IDE students, IDE graduates, and your spouses for putting up with all this stuff this weekend, but most of all for putting up with your husbands and your wives and their college education. So thank you to all of you guys.
Boiler up.